Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people seem to think that they can do what they want, when they want, because they're special. And in today's episode, it's all about entitled Karen bosses, guys, who think they own their employees. So if you've ever had to work for a bad boss, this one's for you. I hope you enjoy the stories, don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I was in retail for about 8 years or so at the time of this story. I had been the store manager for a few different stores, some of them large, multi-million-dollar stores. My strongest suit was visual merchandising. I worked in the same mall for my entire career, and I knew my customer base, and I can follow floor set plans like a beast. I found a job in the actual field I wanted to be in, which is teaching dance, but I still needed a job for mornings and weekends just to keep busy. I took an assistant manager position at a very small maternity store. It was 5 employees total, and the store made maybe $200,000 per year. Now, the store manager was a Karen and was absolutely the most controlling person I'd ever met. She specified the pen I had to use to fill out paperwork. Not the pen color, but the actual brand and model of pen. Anytime that I would set out items or rearrange things, I would come in the next day and it would be completely changed, not following the planogram at all. She would come in late, leave early, take long breaks. The woman was so self-entitled. Worst of all, if you were assisting or selling to a customer, she would bombard herself into the conversation, and she would then take the sale because, quote, I helped them. We didn't work on commission, but we did have sales goals that impacted our job reviews and raises. I also watched her walk into fitting rooms multiple times to check in on the customer instead of speaking to them through the curtain. I could go on and on, just understand that she was bad. Well, we had customer surveys, and I had multiple customers complain to me about her, and I always directed them to the survey and gave her name. One day, I finally had enough, and I put my 2 weeks notice in because I couldn't deal with her anymore, and she immediately gets worse. She didn't trust me to do anything in the store at all. She literally acted like I betrayed her and I would royally F up the store before I left. At this point, our district manager comes in to speak to her about her behavior and bad customer surveys. I overheard that if she got one more bad survey, she was done. That night, I was closing the store alone. About an hour before close, Karen calls the store to ask if she had left her sweater in the back and to go check. I told her I didn't see a sweater, and that's when she said, I wouldn't be surprised if you're lying to me. That was the last straw. I pulled out my phone and I went to the survey site. I then proceeded to fill out the most appalling survey about how awful this manager was. I used all the actual behaviors that she showed in the survey, so it didn't seem off in any way. And I used the name of one of her customers, as we had client books to call people for sales and such. The next day, I come into work and I find out that Karen was fired. She had worked for the company for 8 years, and I end up getting offered to take her position. The last I heard, she was an on-site property manager for some apartment building, because she couldn't afford rent if it wasn't basically handed to her. So the moral of the story is treat your employees and customers nicely, because you never know when you've gone too far. Ain't that the truth? And this reminds me of a quote I read once on a random Instagram post, guys. It said, be nice to the people you meet on your way up, because you will see them again on your way down. That said though, I'm surprised it took that much to get Karen fired. But better late than never, right? And I'd like to think the store ran much better without her around, because that seems to always be the case when horrible managers are fired. And guys, while we're on the topic of complaints made against bosses, this next person shares their story about the time they got rid of a bad boss. So this happened about 7 years ago. I worked for a big box hardware store where safety was always a high priority in this store. If you're getting down a pallet, you have to block off your aisle with gates and the adjacent aisle. You also need a spotter while you're on the forklift. It's pretty standard stuff. One day, I go to the lumber area, and I see a manager who a lot of us really despised as he liked to yell a lot, getting a pallet of cement down for a customer. Now normally that's not an issue, but in this case, he wasn't using gates in any aisle and he was using the customer as a spotter. He even had the poor guy carry the damn flags. As hilarious as that was, I knew this was my opportunity to make sure he knew I saw him. So as petty as I am, I at least gave the manager a chance. I walk up to him and I said, what are you doing? And he responds with, I'm getting an effing pallet down since no one's answering over here. This guy was the manager of the contractor desk and not the lumber area. I took his profanity and the way he snapped at me as a reason to go to management. He was really buddy-buddy with upper management, but I told them anyway. I even wrote out a statement that he swore at me in front of a customer. After the whole ordeal, a few hours later, I was helping out a customer in my own aisle, and the guy comes stomping up to me and he's furious. He screams at me and says, "You ran to effing management, you baby. I was helping a customer." I just respond with, "Hey, I'm helping a customer, and this can wait until later." He then decides to counter with, "I don't give a damn. You need to be careful going to your car later." I immediately get defensive, and I tell him that he's threatening me, and he just walks away. So I go back to management, and long story short, nothing happens of it. I heard they spoke to him about the incident, but these were two fireable offenses. As I said earlier, no one liked this guy because he was a screamer and he was a real piece of crap. He would constantly pick on people lower than him, and eventually, something happened that finally made me snap. I was buddies with one of the lot guys, and one day, I stumbled upon the supervisor chewing this poor kid out. He was complaining that the carts weren't coming in the door fast enough, and he ends it with, "Are you effing stupid or something? You're better off staying at home if you're gonna be this useless." At that moment, I had enough, so I formed a plan. We had these things called VOCs, or Voice of the Customer. Most stores have them, and when you shop somewhere, they give you a little code at the bottom of your receipt to fill out your opinions of the store. We would always post the good and bad ones, surprisingly, in the break room, and I used this to my advantage. For the next month, I had some buddies come in supporting the business, and they would give me their receipts at the end. I even bought some stuff on my days off just to get a receipt that I could fill out my feedback on. I would then go home and take 15 to 20 minutes to fill out a proper review. Only, I filled out the review as if that supervisor had helped me. I gave the nastiest reviews I could that were also believable. It was nice because everything was anonymous and I could only leave my name if I wanted to. One of my reviews said that the store was perfect, except for that one employee. In another review, I said I found it inappropriate to yell at lot attendants in front of customers, and that I won't be shopping there anymore. I even made some up so it wasn't too obvious that it was me. At the end of the day, I wrote so many negative reviews that they had to black his name out whenever I mentioned it. About a month later, he was transferred to another store, and very quickly after that, he was fired from the company altogether. It seems like management couldn't protect him from such negative customer feedback, and they dumped him somewhere else. Too bad he couldn't shake his crappy attitude, or else he would have kept his job. Yeah, it seems like OP was doing everyone a favor by getting rid of that nasty idiot, because seriously, who wants to work with someone like that? Like, people in management positions who love to scream at others are the worst. And not only do they deserve to lose their jobs, but they also deserve a nice smack to the head. And guys, if you enjoyed that one, this next OP also deals with a screaming boss, and listen to how they dealt with it. So over a decade ago, I took on a job tending bar at a tavern in a small town. The bar owner, who, let's call him Nick, had a bit of a reputation for getting angry and yelling at his employees in front of customers. I discussed this openly and honestly with Nick prior to accepting the job. I told him that under all circumstances, yelling at me in front of customers would be unacceptable, and if he had something to say to me, to pull me aside and say it privately. Nick agreed, and I began to work for him that weekend, despite the fact that he was more tolerated in the small town rather than liked. The choice of nearby taverns were thin. For me, everything was going very well. The other bartenders, however, would periodically be the focus of Nick's wrath, and always in front of customers. Periodically, I would remind Nick in sly ways that he'd better not ever yell at me. For example, I would comment to him and say, "I heard so-and-so got in a lot of trouble the other day. It's a good thing you don't yell at me like that." One weekend, I was extremely busy, and when the dirty glasses under the bar were piling up, I didn't have a moment to wash them. We had plenty of fresh glasses for the crowd, and my focus was on serving the patrons in the bar and not washing glasses. There wasn't a free seat in the house, the bar was packed, but it would thin out eventually, and I'd have a few minutes to get some glasses washed. Alas, as luck would have it, the door opens, and in comes Nick. He comments how busy we are, and a big smile crosses his face because we're busy. And for a bar owner, busy means more money is being made. He then proceeds to walk around the back of the bar and he sees the dirty glasses. At that, he proceeds to explode and he begins to scream at me saying, "Why are all these effing glasses sitting here? It's your damn job to wash them and I don't care how busy you are. This crap is unacceptable." The entire bar immediately falls silent. All eyes are on me and Nick, and everyone is watching, waiting to see what would happen next. I never said a word to Nick, and I just smiled at him. I walked over to my tip jar and I emptied it into my purse. I then proceed to walk around to the other side of the bar. I pulled a few dollars out of my purse and I laid them on the bar and I looked at Nick. He just screamed and said, "What do you think you're doing? We're busy. You need to get your ass back to work." That's when I reply, "I quit. I told you to never yell at me in front of my customers, and I'll have a Budweiser, bartender." The people around me just start laughing, and the look on Nick's face was one of total disbelief. I reminded him that we agreed that he would never yell at me in front of customers, and his face got even redder when he realized he'd made a huge mistake. I refused him trying to be the nice guy and asking me to finish out the shift. He ends up working the bar till closing himself. I stayed till closing too, and I laughed to myself as I watched him struggle for a while to wash those dirty glasses. You know, I am actually surprised that the owner let OP stay after what they did. And I just want to say props to OP for quitting on the spot, as some people can only dream about walking out on the job and not taking abuse from their superiors. Like, I just don't get how some people like to get loud and yell at their employees. Like, that's gonna make them want to do the work. Like, people know they can get the point across without screaming, right? When I was in my early 20s, I took a job in a call center doing tech support and warranty stuff for some big brand TVs and DVD players. I also got this job because I'm bilingual. It was a relatively small operation. We were contracted. The call center staffed half a dozen people, and the downstairs was a refurbishing line for the products we supported. I was, at varying intervals, one of the two bilingual agents on staff. Enter Stacy, the Karen of this story. Stacy was the assistant manager of the call center, and she was also the company owner's daughter, who let's call Dick. Like I said, small operation. Stacy was a thorn in my side from day one. She was the typical boss's kid, and she did sweet nothing all day, every day. She would basically show up to collect a paycheck. And the thing is, we were all supposed to take calls, and Stacy did not. She had no management responsibilities, and basically, she refused to touch her phones unless we were all on calls. And even then, she would usually let them stew for 5 to 10 minutes, in hopes that someone else would end their call and they would pick it up. She even had the gall to hound us to grab the next call while she just sat there twiddling her thumbs. I would eventually learn from the actual manager, Max, that her promotion was an attempt to get her to do some work that backfired spectacularly. She did less work than ever once she got her new title. I tried talking to Max about it, as I developed quite a rapport with him and the other agents, and I knew we were all struggling with her behavior. He said that he had tried to encourage her to pick up the slack, but he really couldn't do anything about it because she was Daddy's daughter. We were all basically powerless to do anything. At a certain point, I found myself as the only bilingual agent there. After a particularly harrowing week of getting slammed, while Stacy just sat back and kicked her feet up all day, one Monday, I had enough. I turned my cell phone off and I effed off for the whole day. Frankly, I hoped that would be the end of my career there. The next day, I decided to pick up when they called. It was Max, and I told Max I was done and why. He commiserated, but he pleaded with me to reconsider. Eventually, he got the owner on the line, and they managed to convince me to at least sit down and talk about it. Clearly, having no one to pick up the non-English queue was proving a challenge. The next day, I strolled in nice and late in the morning, and I went to speak with Dick. This will always be one of my favorite memories and a great personal victory. I sat down and I let him have it with both barrels. I told him that his daughter was lazy, irresponsible, her promotion was a joke, and that she was tanking the morale of everyone she worked with. I basically sat there for 10 minutes ranting at this man about what a piece of crap his daughter was. And when I was done, the only thing he wanted to know is what it would take to get me back. I told him I wanted a raise from $12 an hour to $14 an hour, which was plenty decent at the time. And I told him I wanted her to pick up the effing phone when it rings, same as the rest of us. He agreed. I told him that I would come back after lunch so he would have time to talk to her. When I returned, I looked over at Stacy in her little corner and she had a phone to her ear. Satisfied, I went to my desk and I got to work. I would later learn from Max that while I was gone, Dick had attempted to man the non-English queue himself, which was apparently pretty funny because he only spoke English. I'm not sure how he expected to just wing an entire language, but I was happy that he made the attempt. Knowing he had been forced to debase himself like that was the cherry on top. Stacy was far from perfect after that, but I had successfully turned the tables on her. When she'd start to slack, I would either ignore calls until she picked up, or just straight up tell her something like, "We all just got off calls, you can take this one." It was heavenly. I was the only one who could speak to her like that, so I did become a bit of a hero to the other agents, who were also happy to have some relief from the phones and a less soul-crushing power dynamic at work. To me, the satisfaction was knowing that Stacy had to accept that some random employee could effectively order her around in her daddy's company. Also, that she had to actually work for possibly the first time in her life, and she had to live with the fact that her daddy, rather than defending her in the face of my verbal onslaught, basically gave me a bonus for crapping all over her. I will never forget that feeling. So my boss is a nice guy, but sometimes he gets a bit aggravated, and I'll be honest, he doesn't run things the way I would run things. To the story. Recently, a couple of people have left the job due to not being paid overtime and being overworked. So the people left, including me, have been doing 6 or 7 days a week to help keep the place running. It's a small business and money is money. About 2 weeks of this, we asked the boss man, "Hey, so when are new people being hired?" The boss says, "You guys seem to be going on fine as you are. I'm not hiring anyone." And that was the end of that conversation. Being a bit run down and young and fed up with no social life, I booked off a nice 4-day weekend and I bought tickets for a band I liked. The holiday was accepted. Friday comes and I wake up nice and late. I get a couple of drinks in with my best buds and I light up a few smokes and then proceed to get hammered to punk music. I'm thoroughly enjoying my night of sticking it to the man. While drunk, I get a phone call from boss man. I pick up and say, "Hey boss, what's up?" He replies, "Hey, so listen, any chance you can cancel your plans and work tonight and the weekend? We're understaffed and Jeff would have to work 16 hours if you don't come." I tell him, "I'm sorry boss man, I'm not even in town and also I'm wasted." He then proceeds to say, right, so you're gonna make Jeff not go home to his kids because you want to have some fun then. You don't have anything going on, just come to work for a few hours. This is when liquid courage kicks in, and I tell him, look, we're all overworked and you don't even want to hire new people. We all told you this would happen, so no, I'm not coming in. That's when he says, listen, if you don't come in today, don't bother showing up ever again. He then hung up the phone. I went back to work on Tuesday to pick up a few things, and he acted like nothing happened. He just told me to get to work. It turns out boss man did the shift himself because Jeff just got into his car after hearing the conversation over the phone. I started the job search again because still no one new is being hired because of course we seem to be managing fine. Why would he spend money hiring new people? The boss is a nice guy, but his corner cutting to make money is basically treating his staff like poo. Yeah, it's only time before everyone leaves, and boss man learns a lesson he won't forget, because if you F around long enough, you will find out. Like, it just sucks that some people have that mentality, right? Like, sure, the work is still getting done, but at the cost of your employees' mental and physical well-being. I hope OP ended up finding a job because that's 2 red flags right there. 1, the boss seeing nothing wrong with having his workers work 6 to 7 days per week without overtime forever. And 2, he's okay with employees coming into work drunk, all to save money on hiring new staff. Once again, some frickin' people, I tell you. I worked as a hostess during college at a big chain restaurant that had a huge staff. My location was the management training location for the region, so we had a lot of new managers cycling in and out. Most of them were promoted servers or bartenders from different locations, and they had no management experience prior to this. Now, I never loved working this location, as a lot of the new managers were on a little bit of a power trip, as it kind of comes with the territory as new managers. So after a year of being berated for issues that were completely out of my control, I finally got a new job and I put in my 2 weeks notice. I handed it directly to our GM, and I thanked her for everything, and I was set to leave on good terms with the company. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I receive a notification that my schedule was set for the following week. So of course I called the restaurant, and I reminded the on-duty manager that I was no longer an employee, and they would need to put someone else on to fill my spot. They apologized and moved on. Another 2 weeks pass, and I get the same notification. I once again call the restaurant to remind them, and they again apologize. Before I hang up, I say something along the lines of, hey, you need to make a note of this because I'm going out of country next week, and I won't be able to call if this happens again. They agree, and we end it right there. So this is where it gets dramatic. I'm on vacation in Spain, and I get a string of angry texts from a new manager at the restaurant, reminding me that I'm 5 minutes late, and if I don't arrive in the next 5 minutes, I'll be written up. I of course text back saying, I'm sorry, I know you're new, but I put in my 2 weeks over a month ago. I don't know why I'm still on the schedule. The new manager replies, saying that although that may be the case, it's absolutely unacceptable that I'm missing a shift that I'm scheduled for, and if I don't come in, I will be written up, and I'll be in bad standing with the company. I responded explaining that I'm out of the country, and although I'm sorry for their situation, I'm no longer an employee, and there's nothing I can do to help. That's when I receive a string of at least 15 messages back to back. And let me tell you, they were the most unhinged messages I've ever read. They went from calling me unprofessional to lazy to an arrogant brat. Mind you, I've never worked with this woman. She started after I left. She accuses me of lying and being lazy, saying that if you quit a job, you need to give notice and I should be ashamed of what I've done to the restaurant. Of course, I took the screenshots of the conversation and I sent them to one of the other managers. The last I heard, she was suspended and then demoted back to her original position at a different location. It was definitely for the best. Holy moly, what a power-tripping psycho that was. And my thoughts are, OP saved a number of people at some other restaurant from having to deal with her. But yeah, nothing like giving someone on an ego trip a reality check and knocking them down a peg or two. I hope that Karen manager regretted harassing OP. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's another r/entitled people episode, where a psycho Karen nurse tries to jail OP for impersonating a doctor. And spoiler alert, he actually is a doctor. Guys, go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.